At first glance, the Middle Ages in England seemed like an era painted in gray and dark tones. Cold stone castles, dirty streets, and harsh everyday life. But even in this harsh reality, when the days grew shorter and the nights longer, there came a time that illuminated people's lives with light and joy. It was the time of winter holidays. It was a period when even the gloomiest corners were decorated for the holidays, when strict rules gave way to merriment, and when faith and folk traditions intertwined. These holidays were not just a break from work. They were a vital part of the year that gave people hope and strength to survive the darkest part of the year. Watch the video to the end to find out how light and joy entered every home to illuminate the dark ages in England. Winter holidays in medieval England were much more than just one day. They were a grand celebration that lasted 12 days, beginning on Christmas Day and ending on Epiphany. This period was called the 12 Days of Christmas. During this time, all work ceased. Even the strictest lords and monks allowed themselves to relax. Farmers, who had no field work to do at this time of year, could devote themselves entirely to the festivities. It was a time when the world seemed to stand still to pay tribute to joy and faith. The center of all the celebrations was the feast. Castles and estates were filled with the aroma of roasted meat, baked goods, and spices. The main dish was often roast boar or goose, and the tables were laden with a variety of pies and puddings. The food was plentiful and delicious, which was especially valuable in an era when food was often scarce. The feast was accompanied by wine, ale, and cider, which flowed freely. It was a time when social barriers were somewhat relaxed. Lords could invite their servants and even some peasants to their feasts to share the joy of the holiday together. In addition to feasts, various games and performances were held during these 12 days. These could include card games, dice games, and various theatrical performances that were staged right in the castle halls. Street actors and musicians traveled through the villages, bringing fun and entertainment with them. This was a rare chance for ordinary people to see performances and hear music that were usually only available to the nobility. Castles and houses were decorated with holly and ivy branches, which remained green even in the coldest weather and symbolized life and hope. The entire period was filled with merriment, which helped people forget the hardships of everyday life. Medieval society, despite its harshness, valued and knew how to celebrate. The 12 days of Christmas were not just a break from work, but a time deeply rooted in the culture of the time. It was a period when people strengthened their bonds, shared what little they had, and found comfort in shared traditions. During this time, various rituals and ceremonies were held in homes and on the streets. For example, it was common to burn a Yule log. This was a huge log that was brought into the house with great ceremony and placed in the hearth. It was believed that it should burn for the entire 12 days of the holiday. Its long burning symbolized hope for prosperity and protection from evil spirits in the coming year. If the fire went out, it was considered a bad omen. All this was accompanied by songs and carols. Groups of people, often dressed in costumes, went from house to house singing songs, glorifying Christmas and wishing the owners well. In return, they were given food, drinks, or small gifts. It was a time of generosity and mutual support. More elaborate performances were also held during this time, such as masquerades or fool's dances, where participants dressed up as animals or fantastical creatures and acted out scenes, often with satirical undertones. Although many of these traditions had pagan roots, the church gradually adapted them, giving them Christian meaning, and actively participated in organizing the festivities. With the arrival of Epiphany, or Twelfth Night, the festivities reached their climax. On this day, a special feast was held, at which a pie with a bean was served. A single bean was baked inside the pie, and whoever got it became the king or queen of the holiday for a day. All the others had to fulfill his or her wishes. This custom brought much fun and laughter, as even the most modest person could feel like a ruler for a short time. This day also symbolized a return to everyday life, but with new strength and hope. At the end of Twelfth Night, people took off their decorations and returned to their daily duties, full of memories of a joyful time. Imagine that for 2 weeks you could forget all your responsibilities and just enjoy life. Write in the comments which modern holiday you would like to extend for another 2 weeks. Medieval feasts, especially during the winter holidays, were not just meals. They were carefully planned events designed to demonstrate the status, wealth, and hospitality of the host. Castle owners and wealthy landowners competed to see whose table would be the most abundant and lavish. Cooks spent hours preparing hundreds of dishes, many of which were true works of art. For example, a peacock served in its feathers or a roast piglet with an apple in its mouth. Such culinary masterpieces not only satisfied the guests, but also amazed their imagination. Festive dishes often had symbolic meaning. For example, huge pies in which not only coins but also live birds could be hidden, symbolized abundance and miracles. Boar meat, considered a symbol of strength and courage, was an integral part of the Christmas table, and its head, decorated with rosemary, was the main dish. All this created the feeling that the holiday was something more than just a feast. It was a kind of theatrical performance where every element had its own meaning. Bread was an important part of the festive meals. Bread, especially white bread, was considered a luxury product available only to the rich. It was baked in large quantities for the holidays, sometimes decorated with intricate patterns. For the poor, it was one of the few days of the year when they could taste such a delicacy. Festive bread symbolized prosperity and abundance, and sharing it among guests was a sign of brotherhood and community. In addition to the main dishes, the tables were laden with sweets called subtilities. These intricate figures made of sugar and marzipan depicted mythological creatures, coats of arms, or even entire scenes from biblical stories. Such creations were not just desserts. They served to entertain guests and demonstrate the high skill of the cooks. Guests would examine them, admire them, and then eat them. This was further proof that food at the feast served not only to satisfy hunger, but also to provide aesthetic pleasure. Drinks, as already mentioned, played a key role. In addition to ale and wine, various liqueurs and ciders made from apples and pears were popular. In more northern countries, where wine was rare, honey was the main drink. Mead, a hot drink made from honey, often with the addition of spices, was popular during cold winter evenings. Hot drinks not only warmed people up, but also helped them digest the heavy food. They were also part of rituals. For example, passing a cup of mead around the table symbolized friendship and harmony. Festive food was also a way of showing charity. Many wealthy people held feasts not only for their guests but also for the poor. Leftovers were distributed to the needy, and sometimes simple but hearty dishes were prepared especially for those who could not afford a festive meal. This was a kind of Christian duty that allowed the host to demonstrate their kindness and generosity. Thus, food and drink in the Middle Ages were not just part of the holiday, but its heart around which all rituals, traditions, and social interactions were built. They served as an indicator of status, a symbol of faith, and a means of uniting people. But behind all this pomp and abundance lies a deeper meaning. How seemingly simple traditions and rituals can shape our reality and our relationship with the world, and why we continue to follow them even when their original meaning has been lost. We'll discuss this soon. The entrance of the Christmas boar into the hall was the highlight of the holiday. This event was accompanied not only by music, but also by special ceremonies. Sometimes it was carried on a large silver or wooden platter, and the procession was led by the most distinguished guests or even the host himself. They were followed by cooks, servants, and musicians. This procession was solemn and majestic, and everyone present stood up to pay tribute to this symbol of abundance. Sometimes boys walked in front of the boar, carrying dishes with bread and salt to bless the feast. Once the boar had taken its place in the center of the table, the ritual of carving began. This was a matter of honor and required great skill. It was usually done by the host himself or the chief knight to demonstrate his strength and mastery of weapons. He made the first cut, and then other servants continued to carve the meat. Each piece was worth its weight in gold, and its distribution was carefully controlled. The best pieces went to the most honored guests, and the rest went to the less distinguished. It was not just a division of food, it was a division of status and respect. Every element of this ritual was thought out to the smallest detail. For example, the apple in the boar's mouth symbolized the fruits of the new harvest and abundance, while the rosemary, which was often used to decorate the head, symbolized loyalty and memory. Such symbols were understood by everyone and filled the feast with even deeper meaning. It was a kind of silent communication, where each symbol told its own story. Guests looking at the decorations understood that they were part of something much greater than a simple feast. It was a legacy that was passed down from generation to generation. But the boar was not only a symbol of abundance for the rich. In some regions, there was a tradition whereby the poor could come to the homes of the nobility and receive a piece of this sacred meat. It was an act of mercy and solidarity. Distributing wild boar to the poor was an important part of Christian virtue, reminding people that even in times of abundance, they should not forget those who were less fortunate. This custom strengthened social ties and created a sense of community where everyone, regardless of their status, could feel part of the celebration. Special attention was paid not only to the boar itself, but also to its presentation. Cooks and servants competed to make the dish not only delicious, but also visually impressive. The boar's head was often decorated not only with rosemary, but also with laurel wreaths, symbolizing victory. Sometimes its eyes were replaced with cherries or currants, and its fangs with edible marzipan decorations to create a more realistic and even frightening appearance. It was a kind of culinary art, where the chef's skill was demonstrated through details and creativity. After the boar was carved, its meat was served on separate dishes, often accompanied by sauces and spices. The sauces were made from wine, vinegar, and herbs to enhance the flavor of the meat and make it more festive. Spices such as ginger, cinnamon, and cloves were incredibly expensive and were only used on special occasions, further emphasizing the solemnity of the moment. Each piece of meat was imbued not only with flavor, but also with symbolism, reminding guests of the wealth and generosity of the host. The tradition of the Christmas boar was so strong that it can be seen in literature and art. Medieval poems and manuscripts often describe lavish feasts with a boar at the center of the table, confirming its cultural significance. It was a symbol that spoke for itself, requiring no words. It represented abundance, strength, and blessing. For people living in conditions of constant struggle for survival, such a symbol was incredibly important. It gave them hope that the difficulties were temporary and that abundance awaited them in the future. Thus, the Christmas boar was not just a dish, but a ritual, an art form, and a symbol that combined elements of different cultures and beliefs. It was a reflection of social hierarchy and Christian virtue, pagan traditions, and folk merriment. It was a living embodiment of the holiday, passed down from generation to generation, retaining its relevance today as we continue to prepare pork for Christmas. Gift-giving in the Middle Ages was a complex and multifaceted ritual that reflected the hierarchy and social norms of society. Unlike modern Christmas traditions, where gifts are mainly given to children and loved ones, in the Middle Ages this custom was more formal. Lords and kings exchanged gifts to strengthen political alliances, secure support, and demonstrate their power and generosity. Gifts could be symbolic, such as rings with coats of arms, or incredibly valuable, such as thoroughbred horses, engraved weapons, or even castles. Such exchanges were part of diplomatic etiquette, where each gift had its own hidden meaning and political weight. For those lower down the social ladder, gifts were a sign of care and mercy. Feudal lords gave their vassals and servants clothes, food, and firewood to help them survive the harsh winter. This wasn't just charity, but a way to keep people loyal and strengthen the bonds between the lord and his subjects. Such gifts were vital and directly affected survival. Peasants, in turn, exchanged the products of their own labor: dried berries, honey, handmade tools, or simple clothing. There was no place for luxury in such exchanges, only practicality and mutual assistance. Children in the Middle Ages rarely received gifts. Toys were primitive and often made of wood or rags. A gift for a child could be something really useful: a new pair of shoes, a warm cloak, or even a book if the family was wealthy enough. This once again emphasized that in those days, gifts were not entertainment, but a necessity. The tradition of giving trinkets that have no practical value appeared much later, along with the development of trade and the growth of society's prosperity. At the same time, some gifts had a deep symbolic meaning directly related to festive decorations. For example, evergreen plants such as holly, ivy, and mistletoe, which were used to decorate homes and churches, could be given as gifts to wish health and longevity. Their bright green color amid the winter grayness symbolized life and hope. Sometimes people exchanged such branches to share blessings and good luck. Such a gift was much more valuable than it might seem, as it carried not material but spiritual power, which was believed to protect the home from evil spirits and bring prosperity. But what if some of these gifts, such as evergreen branches or mistletoe, were not just presents but Christmas decorations that magically brought good luck? Stay with us, and we'll tell you all about it right now. Christmas decorations in the Middle Ages were not just a fashion statement, but part of a deep tradition rooted in pagan beliefs. People decorated their homes to honor nature and ask for its protection and favor. In addition to evergreen plants, other elements were also used, each with its own special meaning. For example, fir branches and pine cones symbolized fertility and vitality. During the harsh winter months, when nature seemed dead, these decorations served as reminders of the coming of spring and rebirth. Their tart, resinous scent filled the rooms, creating a festive and cozy atmosphere. They were often hung over the hearth, where the heat and smoke could enhance their magical properties. The Christmas wreath also had a special meaning. Its round shape symbolized eternity and infinity. A wreath woven from evergreen branches and decorated with red berries and pine cones was a powerful talisman. It was hung on the front door to protect the house from evil spirits and to attract good luck and prosperity. Sometimes candles were woven into the wreath to symbolize light dispelling darkness. Another important decorative element was candles. They played a huge role as they symbolized Christ as the light of the world. On long, dark winter evenings, candles not only lit homes, but also filled them with a feeling of warmth and hope. Large candles were lit in churches and homes, burning all night long, reminding people of the approaching dawn. In some regions, it was customary to light one candle each day, marking the approach of Christmas. The interior decoration was also symbolic. The Yule log, a huge piece of wood that burned in the hearth for all 12 days of Christmas, symbolized renewal and the warmth of the family hearth. It served as a symbol of family and unity. The ashes from this log were believed to have healing properties and bring good luck. They were collected and kept until the following year. Decorations made from evergreen plants, pine cones, and berries were affordable and easy to make, allowing even poor people to participate in this ritual. This created a sense of community and equality, where everyone could contribute to the festive atmosphere. These decorations were not just beautiful, they were part of the magic of the holiday, filling people's hearts with hope and faith in a better future. Festive songs and carols played a key role in medieval winter celebrations, serving as a kind of collective ritual that brought people of all social classes together. In villages and towns, in rich castles and humble huts, music filled the air, heralding the arrival of the holiday. These songs were a universal language understood by all and served as a powerful tool for passing on traditions and beliefs. Caroling, or caroling as it was called in England, was not just entertainment. It was a ritual of exchange that strengthened social bonds. Those who went from house to house did not just sing for their own enjoyment. They brought blessings and good wishes for the coming year. In return, the homeowners shared what they had: pies, ale, sometimes even small amounts of money. This exchange symbolized mutual aid and solidarity, which was vital during the harsh winter months. The lyrics of carols reflected a complex cultural fusion. Many of them were religious, telling of the birth of Christ and the miracles that accompanied it. However, they also contained elements of pagan rituals associated with nature worship and symbols of rebirth. For example, songs about evergreen plants such as holly and ivy, which were popular decorations, were also mentioned in carols. This synthesis of paganism and Christianity made carols understandable and accessible to all segments of the population, regardless of their level of education or faith. The musical component of carols was simple and memorable. The melodies were easy to play on simple instruments such as the lute, flute, or drum, allowing anyone who wanted to participate in the singing. The simplicity of the music contributed to its rapid spread and transmission from generation to generation. These songs were not recorded, but passed down orally, making them part of folk culture. Music filled homes and streets, creating an atmosphere of universal joy and hope. Carol singing was part of a wider context of festive performances. Sometimes the songs were accompanied by short theatrical scenes in which actors dressed in costumes portrayed biblical characters or heroes from folktales. This added even more spectacle and fun to the festivities. These performances were an important way of teaching the illiterate population about biblical stories and moral values. Festive songs and carols were an important part of cultural heritage, bringing people together and helping them survive the harsh winter months. They were living history told and sung every year, reminding people of their roots and traditions. And yet, what could be more fun than singing about goodness and miracles in exchange for a pie, and then returning home and diving headfirst into medieval games where you could learn your fate and at the same time check if you would fall into a boiling cauldron? Let's discuss it now. During the medieval winter holidays, games and entertainment took on special significance, becoming not just a way to pass the time, but an important part of social life. It was a time when people could briefly step away from strict social norms and simply enjoy life. In castles and courtyards, the nobility held lavish balls and masquerades, where guests dressed in fancy costumes could temporarily hide their identities and communicate freely. Fortune-telling held a special place among these entertainments. Many of them were related to the future harvest, marriage, or health. For example, girls would throw apples into a barrel of water, and the one whose apple floated to the top first was considered lucky and would marry soon. Another popular form of fortune-telling involved the use of walnut shells, a small object symbolizing something important, for example, a coin for wealth or a ring for marriage, was placed inside, and then the shell was dropped into the water. It was believed that whoever's nut did not sink would get what they wanted. These games were not just entertainment, but also a way to cope with the uncertainty of the future. Theatrical performances were another important element of the festive program. In addition to street performances, mysteries were staged in churches, which told stories from the Bible. Amateur actors, and sometimes professionals, used simple sets and costumes to bring to life stories about the birth of Christ, the Magi, and angels. These performances were not only entertainment, but also an important tool for religious education for the illiterate population. They helped people better understand and feel the essence of the holiday. Entertainment was not limited to passive viewing. At feasts, jesters and minstrels entertained guests with jokes, songs, and acrobatic tricks. The role of the jester was unique. He could freely criticize and mock even the most distinguished persons without fear of punishment. It was a peculiar way to let off steam and ease social tensions. For ordinary people who could not afford lavish feasts, folk festivals were the main entertainment. Large bonfires were lit in squares and streets, around which people gathered to sing, dance, and tell stories. Christmas carols and songs were particularly popular and were performed to the accompaniment of simple instruments. It was a time when the entire community came together in shared merriment. These games and entertainments were part of a broader picture of medieval life, where every ritual and tradition had a deep meaning. They helped people cope with the hardships and cold of winter, gave hope for a better future, and strengthened social ties. One of the most unusual winter holiday traditions was the Feast of Fools. It was celebrated in honor of Epiphany and was a kind of satirical reflection of society. For one day, all the rules were turned upside down. The lowest status people became kings and bishops, while the nobility and clergy played the roles of ordinary people. This holiday was a form of social release. It allowed people to laugh at their position for a short time and feel free from strict rules and hierarchy. The Festival of Fools was accompanied by noisy processions, songs, and performances. The King of Fools led a procession that passed through the streets and squares. His entourage consisted of bishops and knights who parodied the behavior of the real nobility. It was a time when people could openly laugh at the authorities without fear of consequences. This holiday was very important for the psychological health of society. It allowed people to release tension and forget about strict rules for a while. The Festival of Fools was not just a jester's performance, but a deeply rooted social phenomenon that had important consequences for society. Its roots lie in pagan traditions associated with chaos and the winter solstice. When Christianity became the dominant religion, the church was unable to completely eradicate these ancient rituals, so it decided to integrate them into its own holidays. The result was this paradoxical holiday, where religious rituals were mixed with folk merriment and satire. The central figure of the holiday was the King of Fools, who was chosen from among the most inconspicuous members of society, servants, peasants, or even beggars. This choice was symbolic. It showed that even the most humiliated person could briefly take their place at the top of the hierarchy. The king was given the right to issue absurd orders that everyone had to obey. He could demand that noblemen serve him at the table or that priests sing indecent songs. All this was part of the carnival culture, where rules were turned upside down and social masks were removed. The procession of fools was the highlight of the festival. It began in the church where fool bishops held parody services and then took to the streets. The procession was accompanied by loud music, jokes, and mockery of the authorities and the rich. People who would not normally dare to even look up at their masters could now openly mock their gait, manners, and speech. It was a kind of collective release of pent-up discontent that prevented more serious social unrest. The Festival of Fools had a deep psychological significance. It served as a kind of safety valve for society. In the Middle Ages, when social mobility was virtually non-existent and life was full of hardship, such a holiday gave people the opportunity to feel part of something bigger and to throw off the shackles of a strict hierarchy. It reminded everyone that even the most powerful people are vulnerable and can become the object of ridicule. However, the holiday also had its critics. The church did not fully approve of it, considering it a manifestation of paganism and chaos. Many priests tried to ban it, but popular tradition proved stronger. The holiday continued to exist, changing its forms and names in different regions, but retaining its essence. It was part of the folk culture that existed alongside the official one. The Festival of Fools was not just a fun diversion. It was a living embodiment of the idea that laughter and satire can be powerful weapons against tyranny and injustice. It showed that even in the harshest conditions, people find ways to preserve their freedom of spirit. This holiday was a reminder that the human spirit cannot be broken, and that even in dark times, there is always room for joy and laughter. It was a time when society briefly became a mirror in which everyone could see themselves from the outside, and social roles were reversed, creating incredible chaos. Light played a crucial role in the winter holidays of the Middle Ages. Winter was a time of darkness, when the days were short and the nights were long. During this period, people used candles and torches to light their homes and streets. Candles were an expensive commodity, but they were not spared for the holidays. They symbolized hope, faith, and the victory of light over darkness. Many candles were lit in churches and homes, creating an atmosphere of warmth and comfort. Candles also had a practical use. They lit the way for pilgrims walking to church and helped people gather together after dark. Candles were also used to light festive tables, making feasts even more solemn and majestic. This light was a symbol of Christmas, which brought light to the world. Huge Yule logs were placed in homes and castles, where they burned in hearths throughout the 12 days. They symbolized the hope that fire and warmth would keep the house warm throughout the year. The symbolism of light in the Middle Ages was multi-layered and deeply rooted in culture, combining Christian beliefs with ancient pagan traditions. The winter solstice, when the shortest day is replaced by longer days, was a time when people celebrated the return of the sun and the victory over darkness. Candles and bonfires were not just sources of light, they were a ritual way to help the sun be reborn. Later, with the spread of Christianity, this pagan symbolism was adapted. Light became a symbol of Christ, who was called the light of the world. Lighting candles in churches and homes became a reminder of the birth of the Savior, who, according to belief, brought light and hope to a world plunged into sin and ignorance. The Yule log was one of the most striking examples of the combination of pagan and Christian traditions. This custom has its origins in ancient Celtic and Scandinavian rituals. A huge log, or even an entire tree trunk, was solemnly brought into the house and lit in the hearth. It was believed that it should burn continuously for the 12 days of the holiday. If the fire went out, it was considered a bad omen. The ashes from the burnt log were believed to have magical properties. They were kept until the following year, added to livestock feed to protect them from disease, or scattered over the fields to ensure a rich harvest. The logs symbolized the warmth of the hearth, prosperity, and the continuity of life in the harsh winter. Torches were another important source of light. On Christmas Eve and throughout the holidays, people took to the streets with torches to light the way, drive away evil spirits, and create a festive atmosphere. Torchlight processions were especially popular in cities, where they attracted crowds of people and created a magnificent spectacle. The light of the torches symbolized the unity of the community and the joint struggle against the forces of darkness. It was a time when people, regardless of their social status, could come together to share the joy of the holiday. Light was also used in less obvious ways. For example, lanterns made from pumpkins or turnips with carved patterns were common in Celtic regions. A candle was placed inside, and this lantern, known as a jack-o'-lantern, was used to scare away evil spirits and remind people of the souls of the dead. These lanterns were a kind of little stars that shone during the dark season. The symbolism of light was inseparable from festive decorations. Along with evergreen plants, candles were hung on trees and in houses to symbolize the stars that lit the way for the Magi to the birthplace of Jesus. In some traditions, each candle on the tree represented a prayer or a wish. This created not just a beautiful picture, but a profound ritual where each element had its own meaning. In the Middle Ages, light was not just a physical phenomenon, but a spiritual and symbolic force. It was associated with hope, faith, protection, and rebirth. It reminded people that even in the darkest times, there is always room for light. This symbolism was passed down from generation to generation, becoming part of the cultural code. And today, when we light Christmas candles and garlands, we may be continuing this ancient tradition without even realizing it. Winter holidays in the Middle Ages were a unique blend of Christian and pagan traditions. Christmas, as a Christian holiday, brought with it biblical stories and hymns. However, many customs, such as decorating homes with evergreen plants, celebrating feasts, and using fire, had deep pagan roots. Pagan peoples believed that the winter solstice was a time when evil spirits were particularly strong and that it was necessary to protect their homes and communities. They used evergreen plants as a symbol of life that does not wither even in the harshest frosts. The church, seeking to attract pagans, did not ban their traditions. Instead, it skillfully incorporated them into the Christian context. For example, pagan winter solstice festivals became part of Christmas celebrations. This process was very gradual and took place over several centuries. The result was a unique blend of traditions that made the holidays accessible and understandable to all segments of the population. This mixture of traditions helped winter holidays become such an important and beloved time of year, when people could find comfort and joy in their faith and old customs. The blending of pagan and Christian traditions during the winter holidays was not just a coincidence, but a deliberate strategy that allowed the new religion to take root and spread throughout Europe. Ancient peoples such as the Celts, Germanic tribes, and Scandinavians had their own holidays associated with the winter solstice. The pagan festival of Yule was one of the most important. It was celebrated in honor of the return of the sun and the beginning of a new solar cycle. It was a time when people gathered to celebrate the victory of light over darkness, lit bonfires, made sacrifices to the gods, and held lavish feasts. When Christianity began to spread, the church faced a problem: how to convince people to give up their centuries-old traditions. The answer was found in adaptation rather than outright prohibition. In the 4th century, Pope Julius Thurnus officially set the date of Christmas as December 25th. This date was not chosen by chance. It coincided with the Roman pagan festival of Saturnalia and the birthday of the unconquered sun, the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti. Thus, pagans could continue to celebrate on their usual dates, but now their holidays took on a new Christian meaning. This process of cultural syncretism affected all aspects of the holiday. Pagan symbols were given new interpretations. For example, evergreen plants, which originally symbolized life and fertility, became associated with the eternal life given by Christ. The Yule log, which was previously a ritual in honor of the sun god, became a symbol of the warmth and light of Christ. Even carols, traditional songs that previously glorified the gods of nature, began to tell of the birth of the Savior. The church used other methods to attract pagans. For example, it renamed temples dedicated to pagan deities in honor of Christian saints, and turned old holidays such as Samhain, the prototype of Halloween, into All Saints' Day. This approach was very effective. It allowed people to keep their familiar rituals while integrating them into a new religious system. The blending of traditions did not always go smoothly. Some priests and religious leaders opposed pagan customs, considering them heresy. However, for most people, this did not matter much. They saw harmony rather than contradiction in these traditions. For them, Christmas was a holiday that united faith, nature, and community life. They could pray in church and then return home to sing pagan songs and light a log in the hearth without seeing any contradiction in this. This unique blend of traditions made medieval Christmas so rich and multifaceted. It showed that culture is a living organism that is constantly changing and adapting. Christmas became not just a religious holiday, but a cultural phenomenon that brought together elements from different eras and beliefs. We continue to preserve this heritage today. Thus, winter holidays in medieval England were not just a break from work. They were a vital period that gave people strength and hope. They were filled with fun, delicious food, and music that helped people forget their hardships. In this dark and harsh world, the holidays were a bright and warm light that brought people together and gave them strength. It was a time when faith and tradition intertwined to create a unique atmosphere of joy and comfort. Which medieval Christmas tradition do you think would be most useful in the modern world? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our new videos.